police job you are not fit for, right? So that is not discrimination, right? So that is a logic. The same way, the planet exists in the Goldilocks region, but the size is not sufficient enough. Atmosphere cannot exist. If the atmosphere cannot exist, life cannot exist, right? So the next criteria is the size of the earth was good enough. And the third condition is presence of water. The life started on water, right? Life started within the waters, later moved to the earth, right? So when you talk about geological time scale, right? So we have different eras, right? So within that we talk the life actually started, the complex life actually started about 600 million years ago. Before that, life existed since 3.5 billion years ago. Solar system, the earth is about 4.5 billion years old, right? About 4.5 billion years old. But the life started about 3.5 billion years ago only. Life started. So bacteria, right? Archaebacteria. The bacteria started to exist since a very long time. But the complex life being started only around 600 million years ago, right? So with that complex life, so all this diversity existed, and most of them have become extinct because of the global mass extinction events, right? But everything started within the waters first, later moved to the land, right? Because the surface temperature is not at all habitable. Surface temperature is not at all habitable. Long ago, when the earth has actually formed, surface temperature of the earth is about 6000 degrees Celsius, which is the surface temperature of the sun, right? With that temperature, no life can exist. So gradually the earth's surface cooled down, where the life moved towards the land, right? So the next one is presence of water. That means presence of H2O in liquid state. Presence of H2O is not what is needed. H2O is present for on the other planets as well, icy planets, but presence of H2O in the liquid state is important, right? So that exists on the earth. The fourth criteria is inclined axis. The earth's inclined axis. So the next criteria is inclined axis. Why inclined axis? The earth's angle is tilted to 23.5 degrees, right? Earth axis is tilted to 23.5 degrees. So why? Leaning Tower of Pisa, one of the wonders. The reason why it is a wonder, because it is not falling down. If it falls, it is not a wonder, right? So the inclined axis, does the inclined axis stay the same way ever? Does it stay? It changes. The axis changes, right? Every few years, about the axis, I think about 20,000 years or so, the axis changes from 21.5 to 24.5. So we call it Milankovitch cycles. We call it Milankovitch cycles, right? So Earth's axis is at around 23.5, right? So what is the advantage of that inclined axis? What can be the possible advantage? Seasons, right? Climate we might have. What is the difference between the climate, season, weather? Exactly. The climate is nothing but average atmospheric conditions over a period of 30 years. Right? So when you're talking about India's climate, tropical monsoon, it is not talking about today. Just because we told climate is monsoon, so we say, where are monsoons, sir? Rain is not there. No, you cannot call it. It is average atmospheric conditions over a large period of time, 30 years. Then you call climate. Right? What is the weather? It is atmospheric conditions which change over a day. You go for weather forecast. That means morning it is cloudy, the afternoon it is sunny, evening it might rain. That is weather forecast. Season, for a period of 3 months, it is changing. The seasons are changing for a period of 3 months, right? Why the seasons are changing? Because the earth axis is tilted. When the earth axis is tilted towards the sun, one surface is facing towards the sun much closer, and the other is facing away, is a little farther away from the sun. So the amount of sunlight that it is reaching one hemisphere, southern hemisphere here, is more compared to that of the northern hemisphere. So in the southern hemisphere, if it is summer, in the northern hemisphere it is winter. And if the earth rotates and comes to the other direction, and now the northern hemisphere is closer to the sun and the southern hemisphere is farther from the sun. So for the northern hemisphere it is summer, for the southern hemisphere it is winter. So because of the inclined axis, we have seasonal variations which resulted in the complex life forms to exist. Right? So those seasonal variations. So these are the reasons why Earth has become extremely good for the life to sustain. Any queries so far? Any questions so far? No? Paka? 100%? Lock kar de? By the way, I will not give any money. Right? Just because I asked the same questions Amitabh Bachchan is asking. So, yes, please.
Like you said before that because of less surface area, everything in space will be in round shape, but not
Oh, thank you so much. Right? We have, so 8 planets, right? So Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. So we have something called asteroid belt, which I forgot to explain. Right? So between the Mars and the Jupiter, we have something called asteroid belt. Why asteroid belt is present only there? So that is the first question. Why? What is the reason for the existence of asteroid belt between the Mars and Jupiter only? So? But why? So what is the difference? The asteroids are small rocky particles which are just swirling around, right? They are just dancing there. Why they are present only between this space? That is my question. Exactly, because the gravity is being influenced. So if you see the solar system, till Mars, the planets are like kind of similar to equidistant. But from the Mars to the Jupiter, there is lots of wide space that is separating the planets. Lots of space that is separating. That means between them also the planets existed, but because the Jupiter is so big, now the gravity is being influenced by the sun as well as Jupiter. So they cannot maintain the path. They stuck with each other, forming the smaller asteroids. Right? So because there are broken parts of a planet, there is no geographical shape. There is no geographical shape. They exist in different kinds of shapes, like amoeba. Right? How we draw amoeba? We do not have to practice amoeba. Right? We draw. That is the best diagram we can ever draw. Right? Other than that, 2 houses, 2 mountains between the sun, right? Some river coming. Other than that, amoeba is the only diagram where we can draw impeccably with perfection. Right? So the reason why they do not have the shape properly is because of this reason. That is the reason why asteroid belt is present between them. Okay? So thanks for the question. So far no queries for you. Right? Yes. Yes, please.
You said only asteroid belt is present between Jupiter and but another asteroid belt is also present
Away from the
Kepler belt.
Kepler belt. Sir, we call the Pluto as the smallest Kepler belt object. So why? Because the particles which are away from the sun, they also form the smaller particles. They cannot come together because the gravity is not there, sunlight is not there, nothing exists. So the smaller particles also form out of the solar system because they cannot form the bigger objects. So that's why we have the smaller particles away from the solar system as well. Interstellar space. Right? So in the interstellar space, we have the smaller particles also because they cannot become big. They cannot come together, unfortunately. So because of that, we have the Kepler belts away from the Pluto, near the Pluto as well. So we classified the Pluto as one of those objects because the size is small, because it cannot maintain its own orbit. It is being influenced by the other planets' gravitational forces. Right? So that's why we downgraded the Pluto to be the dwarf planet. Okay? So any other questions? Hmm.
they are also based on the other stars.
Other stars as well, yes, which they come from the other planets which move and stuck here. So they are also the reasons for the contribution. Yes, please. Right? Any other? So far? Understood? Before I go to the next concept, the way I explain, I know it will be very interesting. I'll ensure that it is interesting. Right? It will be like a very good story. But if you do not write anything when I teach, by the time you leave the classroom, you will be like, what the hell did he teach? Right? You will be totally clueless. You cannot understand anything. It will be like something he taught, which is very good. What did he teach me? No, I don't know. I am totally clueless. Right? I don't remember anything. So that's why, please ensure you have the running notes. Right? So whatever, please write it. Even after you feel like I know the concept, you at least mention the title there. Right? Even if you know the concept. So that it will be like, okay, these are the concepts which he has taught, and after going home you can actually refer. Right? And by the way, whatever the concepts I teach, this is my book which I have written. So you have a guide to actually follow the same content. Right? So for UPSC or APPSC, you can ensure you follow my book. Right? So thoroughly everything what I have discussed in the class right now will be there in this. Right? You do not have to deviate other than the current issues. Right? Because I am revising the edition. So the revised edition will come out, but the current issues we cannot incorporate everything. So be prepared with the current issues. Right? Other than the current issues, we have all the concepts here in a very clear defined way. Right? So the next, biology and biotechnology. So the biggest fear unfolds now. Right? So these are the concepts which is extremely difficult. The reason why I start with geography and immediately jump to biology is because if the humans did not exist, there is no point of studying and preparing for examinations. There is nothing. Right? So that's why we start with the biology and biotechnology. Before we get into the concepts, right, let us learn certain terminology. Right? Before we go into the concepts, let us be familiar with some kind of terminology. Cloning. Okay, let us be familiar with these concepts as of now. Okay, there are other gene, protein, peptide or polypeptide. Okay, fine. So let us be familiar with these concepts first, and then we'll go into the discussion of the actual concepts. Okay, so first, atoms. What are atoms? Atoms are nothing but the indivisible part of matter, as we studied in our 4th class, 5th class or 6th class. Right, within these 3 classes, depending upon your curriculum, CBSE, SSC or whichever. So we have studied about atoms. Atoms are nothing but the indivisible part, which we have discussed previously long ago. Right, but later studies found that even the atoms are divisible. Right, we have certain subatomic particles as well. Right, so this is the smallest form of matter that could exist naturally. Right, we call them atoms. Right. So the hydrogen, whatever the periodic table we have about 200 odd elements: hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, whatever the nonsense which we have by hearted, right, in our PUC or +1 and +2, right, this thing. So those are atoms. What are molecules? Because the atoms cannot exist with instability, the atoms combine with other atoms to form the molecules. Right, atoms cannot exist individually. Humans cannot exist individually. They are social animals. They have to be associated with some other person. Right, even if you are traveling alone on a train, right, you need to talk to some other person. So you have to have the conversation with other person. Social animals. The same way, the atoms cannot exist just like that. So they interact with the other atoms to form the molecules. And here, not all atoms react. There are some stable atoms, right, inert gases, right, which already attained the octet configuration, which already attained the stability. They will not react. They will not react, right? Helium, neon, krypton, argon, radon, xenon. So these are the inert gases which doesn't react. They already attain the stability. That means there is no electron which can be shared for bonding. Right? So those are molecules. And the molecules which are bigger in size, we call them macromolecules. Right? The molecules which are bigger. So when you are talking about glucose, right, this is a bigger molecule. Carbon 6, hydrogen 12, oxygen 6. Very big. Right? So these kind of molecules, the bigger molecules, macromolecules, right? And within these macromolecules, some macromolecules are called biomolecules, which resulted in life. Right? Some macromolecules helped in the creation of life. Some macromolecules helped in creation of life. We call them biomolecules. Bio, life. Life resulting molecules. And within those biomolecules, we have carbohydrates, proteins, fats or lipids, and nucleic acids. These are the 4. Carbohydrates, proteins, fats or lipids, or nucleic acids. Carbohydrates. So, any gymmers here who work out a lot? Anybody who works out? Right? So, the classic myth which we have. So if you are working out, if you really want a good body, carbohydrates you should eliminate, proteins only you have. That is the stupidest thing you can ever do. You need to have carbohydrates. Why? The carbohydrates are the energy molecules. You get energy only through the carbohydrates. Right? So the carbohydrates, if you take the standard definition, we call them aldehydes and the ketone groups. The carbon polymers of aldehydes and ketones, don't write it. We don't want it. UPSC doesn't ask for it. Right? So we have carbohydrates. You remember them as the energy molecules. So you're eating rice, carbohydrates. So when you are taking carbohydrates, what is happening? The carbohydrates are being metabolized in the body, resulting in the formation of energy. If you do not eat, right, our class is till 1 o'clock, right? By 12:30, alarm rings, right? And after that, whatever I say, you don't remember, right? You'll be like, sir, please leave us, right? So why? All the energy which you have taken is already consumed by the cells. Now the cells are craving for energy. Now you have to supply them energy back. So you have to take carbohydrates, right? They are the energy molecules. How are we getting carbohydrates? From the plants. We cannot produce our own carbohydrates. We are not photosynthetic, right? We are not photosynthesis. We cannot perform photosynthesis. We cannot stay in the sunlight and like recharge, right? That is not possible. Recharge cannot happen in the sunlight, right? So plants can do that. The plants are utilizing the sunlight and they are taking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and they are fixing that carbon dioxide in the form of glucose. We call it photosynthesis, right? This is photosynthesis, right? It is taking carbon dioxide and water, and in the presence of sunlight, it is preparing glucose. We call it photosynthesis. Why does it prepare glucose? So that it can utilize for its survival, right? It is taking those carbohydrates and it is performing some other function. It is living, right? So that glucose, that carbohydrate we are taking, right? Heterotrophs, autotrophs. Autotrophs generate their own energy. Heterotrophs consume from the autotrophs, right? So we are taking those carbohydrates. So the carbohydrates are energy molecules. Carbohydrates are energy molecules. Now the proteins, right? The proteins are the building blocks for all the muscles, right? The proteins, first thing, are the building blocks for all the muscles. So the muscles are made up of proteins, right? And at the same time, for any kind of a reaction that happens in your body, any kind of a reaction that happens in your body, that reaction is mediated by proteins. We call them enzymes. We call them enzymes or enzymes, right? Enzymes are also known as biocatalyst. They are also known as biocatalyst. What do you mean by catalyst? Catalyst is nothing but which fastens the rate of reaction. It increases the rate of reaction. If you are talking about one kind of reaction, it is literally like for the girls. If your mother says anything, the rate at which you react is like, I'll do it later. Girls. If the father with an angry face or just one stare, I am doing it right now. Alright? So the father is a catalyst which increases the rate of reaction. Alright? So for boys it is vice versa. Right? If the father sees at an angry face, you'll get up from there and you'll go to the other room. Right? That's all. There is no difference. If the mother, she'll be behind us to do the work. Or else, the most worst thing all the mothers do is, they'll do it themselves. After asking. Right? So to prevent that, we have to go and do it. We don't have a choice. So it increases the rate of reaction in the bio means in the living organisms. So we call them enzymes. So any kind of a reaction happening in your body is mediated by enzymes. If you're taking food, right, you're taking carbohydrate. So carbohydrate is broken down by amylase enzyme. Right, when you're eating biryani rice, right, biryani rice, so saliva that is being produced, amylase, it has amylase enzyme that is breaking the glucose and converting into energy. And the mutton chicken you're eating, so what is happening, right? So we have peptin, trypsin enzymes which breaks the proteins, right? So we have lipases to burn the fats, to digest the fats. We have the nucleases to digest the DNA, RNA. So these are enzymes. All enzymes are proteins in nature. All enzymes are proteins in nature. That means every enzyme you may take, that is protein. Every enzyme is protein. But not all proteins are enzymes. Because the muscles are made up of proteins. That is not an enzyme. Not all proteins are enzymes, but all enzymes are proteins. Right? All enzymes are proteins, but not all proteins are enzymes. Right? So the proteins are the building blocks, and the proteins are the polymers of amino acids. Right? We have in our body about 20 different amino acids. We have about 20 different amino acids, and all the proteins are a combination of those 20 amino acids. Right? All the proteins are a combination of those 20 amino acids. The sequence changes and the length changes. Right? But the basic composition is those 20 amino acids only. It is like English literature or Telugu literature. So we have certain number of alphabets. Right? Only with those alphabets the entire language happens. With the same analogy, so we have 20 amino acids, all the proteins are based upon those 20 amino acids. Right? And the fats. Right? These are carbon polymers of COOH groups, where these are energy storing molecules. These are energy storing molecules. They store the energy. Right? They are energy storing molecules. We have energy molecules, carbohydrate. So whenever you eat excess carbohydrates, the body can utilize only what's needed. And excess amount of glucose is stored in the form of fats. Why? Because in the future, whenever there is a laxity, we can burn the fats and get energy from. Right? So that's why we have fats. That's why we have fats. Okay? And finally, the nucleic acids. These are the genetic or hereditary molecules. These are the genetic or hereditary. These are the hereditary molecules. That means the entire information about how an organism exists, entire information how an organism exists is present within the DNA or the nucleic acids. DNA or RNA. Right? The entire information about the human body, or for that matter any organism, exists within the DNA. Right? So how tall I can become, so what kind of color complexion I have, what kind of hair I have, what kind of eyes, what kind of nose, what kind of mouth. Right? So everything about my biology is present in my DNA. Right? Everything. So that is genetic information or genetic code. Right? So that is present in the form of DNA or RNA. For us, DNA. For a certain viruses, RNA. For a certain viruses, it is RNA. For the other viruses, it can be DNA as well. For viruses, DNA or RNA. Right? Bacteria, DNA. So all the bigger life organisms, it is DNA. DNA is a hereditary molecule where you have some information and you pass on that information to the offsprings. That is the reason why you look like your parents or your relatives. Right? There is a similarity. Immediately after seeing you, they can identify who your brother or sister is. Right? Very easily. Right? So there are differences as well. I'll tell you the reason why we have differences. You cannot say tomorrow telling that, sir, my sister or brother doesn't look like me, maybe he's adopted. Right? No, there are differences for that as well. I'll tell you the reasons why there are differences. Okay? So we have DNA, RNA. So what is the full form of DNA? Deoxyribose nucleic acid. I'll tell you later. And RNA is ribose nucleic acid. Okay? And we have some concept called, first I'll go for gene. Right? What is a gene? Gene is a functional component of the DNA. We have DNA, it is very big. Right? Human DNA is about 3.2 billion base pairs length. It is extremely long. But the entire length does not represent me. There are hardly 20,000 genes. There are around 20,000 regions that are functional. That means those 20,000 regions only are producing some kind of a protein. Right? So because of that protein only I am like this.